You have to come first. That's just the way that it is. It's so hard. And it's one of those, like, to get to that point, we do have to distill a lot of old information, but it is absolutely important for us to get to that point.
Hi, I'm Carol Podell, and this is She Takes the Lead. Hi, party people. It's Carol. I am very excited. I have a really cool guest today, and I loved having this conversation with her. Her name is Sapha Pardo Heckman. She is known as Your Soulful Goddess. That's her handle on social media and her website, and she is inspired. And ironically, that is part of who she is in her title, Priestess Inspired Mentor. She's on a mission to help you create a life of love, abundance, and fulfillment. She guides you on a journey of self-discovery and transformation that honors your unique path and purpose so you can reclaim your feminine self-authority, attract fulfilling relationships, and thrive in a life that aligns with your soul's deepest desires. This woman is the most sensual person I've ever met. And the thing that's amazing is that what prompted me to really get into wanting to know this woman and become friends with her was she started talking about dating herself, about, I think it was like making love to herself. And I'm not talking about masturbation or, taking yourself out on a date. I mean, it was about creating, I don't even know how to explain it. You're just going to have to listen. So without further ado, here is the lovely and brilliant Sapha Pardo Heckman. Hey, Sapha, how are you?
I am great. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to have this chat.
Of course. Yeah, me too. I'm ready to go.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, a little bit about me. On just a human level, I'm a big nerd. I love all things fantasy and just nerdy things. I've got a big heart and I just love to spend time reading and enjoying life. I think that life really needs to be savored. I always say that we get to live lives that feel like a romance for the ages. And that is sort of also where I lean into powerfully within my business. So on a business level, I'm a feminine embodiment and empowerment mentor. And what my focus is really helping women not just reawaken their divine feminine essence, but also create lives that get to feel deeply fulfilling in every area of their life. The focus really mainly being that for so many of us, we spend so much time identifying with the external that we forget who we are. And we spend so much time doing the work, listening to the podcast, doing therapy, all the things. And yet somehow we still feel stuck. And for me, one of the biggest pieces that is often missing in our journeys to healing and our journeys to become the women that we really truly want to be in this lifetime is that we don't know how to touch that level of embodiment. And a lot of times that comes from really falling madly in love with the self, which leads me to my main way of working with people, which is this process of mindful self-seduction and personal sovereignty. So those are the areas of not just expertise, but true love that I carry for the women in this world in my heart. If I could see every woman in this world just not just imbued in her power, but deeply content and fulfilled and thriving and taking up space in this world without feeling like they have to minimize their self in any way, oh gosh, I would just be so happy.
So many things I want to go back to. So many things. I'm mental note. Oh my God, this is amazing. So I'm just going to jump on one that caught my ears right away. Self-seduction. Tell me what that is. We're going to go back to a few questions, but tell me what that just sounds. I love anything that's about seduction. So tell me.
Same. So mindful self-seduction, it cracks me up because I think that people hear me say that and they think I'm talking about taking care of the self in that way. But I'm while that could be an aspect of it, for me, the art of self-seduction is the art of falling in love with the self, but really mastering the technique of going into a place of interpersonal relationship with the self, meaning developing deep intimacy with the self. One of the things that I always use as an example to explain this to people is think about what it felt like the first time that you fell in love with someone, or when you were in the process of falling in love and you were trying to court them. One of the funny things that happens is as humans, when we go into that realm, is we start getting really not fixated, but excited and thrilled by the little things. What is your favorite color? Where did you grow up? What did you like to do? What is it that you want to do now? What are your passions? Where do you see yourself in the future? What makes you tick? And that is part of the process of seduction. Because what we're doing when we're asking these questions is we're building intimacy. We're getting to know the other person. We're making notes and we're starting to understand what makes them tick to see if there is a cohesive place where we can then unite and walk hand in hand. And so it's the same with us. Now, what's interesting is for most of us, the relationship with self is very fractured. We tend to see ourselves as other. We tend to relate to ourselves as this thing that I carry around. I carry this body around. I carry this persona around. I am the mother. I am the sister. I am the wife. I am all these things. And yet, very, very rarely do we spend time getting to know and fall in love with the self outside of, yes, I can fall in love with myself because my legs are strong and even if I'm not, the weight that I want to be, at least I have legs. Like I make fun of it, but I feel such a pain in my heart when I hear people talk about self-love in those terms. And I understand that for many of us, the idea of falling in love with the self feels unattainable. And not only unattainable, but difficult and just impossible. And I know this because this was me. Like I spent a vast majority of my young adult life and young life, not even just adult life, but young life, really repudiating every part of who I was. And so I know, like if someone would have told me back then, just love yourself, I would have slapped them across the face. It wouldn't have made any sense. And so I understand why we collectively think that the best way to help is to say, well, you can love yourself even if you don't weigh, I don't know, 100 pounds. You can love yourself by thinking that your body is strong and it gets to do these things. And while that's okay, it feels like a disservice. It feels like you're teaching yourself how to put up with yourself and how to settle for less. And so, what we really need to start doing is we need to start opening the door to that conversation. Really, what would it be like if you really tried to seduce yourself? What if you really saw yourself as someone who is so worthy of like love and devotion and attention and cherishing that you were like, I want to get to know me. I want to sink my teeth into every part of who I am. I want to like look at myself in the mirror and go, you know what? I want this person. I think this person is sexy. I think this person is amazing. And there are no caveats. There is no, oh, well, when I lose 10 pounds, I will get there. There is no, because I'm strong and because I can hold you, I do that. There's no like, no, like just plain and simple. And the thing is, the way to get there is by getting to know the self. You can't force yourself to wake up in the morning, look at yourself bare naked in the mirror, jiggle your arm, look at the jiggles and be like, oh, this is amazing. You can't force yourself to get there, but you can get there by having conversations with who you are. Like if you do that in the mirror, you're like, oh my God, I hate myself, and start asking where that comes from and what it means. And you're like, tell me about it. And I want to hold you and I want to protect you and I want to cherish you and I want to be with you because that's how we feel with someone who we are trying to seduce. The seduction isn't just about the act of sexual abandon.
Usually not at all about the final part. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the mystery, but it's also like that combination of like supple melting. And so you want to melt into yourself. You want to get to that place. So that's a very long answer to your question, but that's the process of self-seduction is really the rediscovery of the self.
That's incredible. I'm so in here with you right now too, because I've been like marinating over the idea of self-care and what it is. And I feel like so many, especially women, mostly I've talked to women about it. When you get into this point in life, you have people that you're taking care of, whether that's your parents, your children, your family, your job. Women are typically nurturers, like in nature, right? And like I am a caretaker. I actually enjoy it. There's a lot of it that I enjoy, whether that's programming or not. I still get a lot out of it. But it's really funny because after spending so many years, and I've talked to so many women about this, after spending so many years focusing on other people, when you ask somebody what they want or what self care is, they're like, I don't know. They're like, every single answer is always like, well, you need to take care of yourself. Okay, I know. Well, I booked a massage, or I'm getting a mani-pedi, or whatever. And I'm like, that is not it. That's never been it. Certainly not for me. Like, I don't know, maybe if you get a massage every week, like maybe that's your meditative state and everything else. One massage biannually is not going to like get you to any kind of place that you want to be, because life just comes back. And the piece that I think is interesting is like, it's arbitrary to say like, well, what's self-care? I don't know. But like, that's when you have to kind of, that's when it's the inside job, right? Which is why this is so fascinating to me, because you're actually providing techniques to get to answer these questions. Like, not just like, oh, well, let me try this out or this out or this out. You actually have developed techniques to get there.
I agree. And I'm actually laughing because a little while ago, originally, when I created this, it was intended to be like a 21-day challenge. However, I'm not the kind of person that does really well with challenges. And so when I like launched this, and it was called Queen of Self-Seduction, right? And when I launched this, and Queen of Self-Love, when I launched it, I was like, okay, we're going to do 21 days and then I was like, this doesn't feel right. So what I ended up doing was I just created this entire like book, right? Little booklet for people to really go in there and start better understanding the process of self-seduction. And it's got questions that are meant to help you go there. It's got prompts that do encourage people to do the things that might feel uncomfortable and that do relate to that process of self-seduction, like going to the massage, for example.
Yeah.
And why I like that, and I agree with you, I don't think that by itself, in and of itself, is self-care. Sometimes people will tell me that they think self-care is, well, I do my self-care. I like shower every morning and I do my hair. And I'm like, that's just you caring for your body, but that's like bare minimum in dating, right? That's like saying, oh, so and so brought me flowers. And I'm like, that's bare minimum. Like, that is not impressive. So it's the same for you. You doing like your nails and stuff, it's bare minimum. But the reason I include that as part of the self seduction process is because there are some things that really touch on intriguing and important pain points within the subconscious and within the self that activate when we speak of these things. For example, I had one of the ladies that was in part of like the challenge, not challenge container, that she was saying, I love this, but I don't want to do some of the things that you say in here. For example, I can't go get a massage because I can't afford it. And it's valid. And I also asked her a couple more questions. And what we discovered was, and this is true of a lot of us, a lot of times, is what we discovered is that she prioritizes everybody else in her life so much, her children, her spouse, her mom, her dad, everybody, that she doesn't see herself as a worthwhile priority to do even a $70 massage. And I was like, are you really telling me you're not going to be spending that money on this or this or this? And then we get to the crux of what goes deeper within the self, which is like, ask yourself what it is about the things that really trigger you, that really make you uncomfortable, what it is about them that you are letting yourself be informed by. In other words, meaning, what is it about the thought of booking a night at the Ritz? For example, I just did this and it was so great.
Nice.
Booking
Amazing.
a night at the Ritz and staying there and getting pampered and going to, what is it about that makes you uncomfortable and that makes it taboo and that makes it wrong? Because a lot of times people will feel like, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to like put myself at risk. This is like, it's so trivial. I don't want to do this. Like, this doesn't seem important enough. And I'm like, what is it about that is really telling you the truth of what you think about yourself that matters? Right now, I'm not saying go waste your money. That's not the kind of relationship we want with money. But I'm saying, what is the relationship you want to have with yourself? And if you're like, you know what? I've been working really hard. I need a little break. I want to get extra pampered. I deserve all the extra goodies. And that makes you really light up and feel really good. And you know that you're like, really, that's seduction. You're seducing yourself by taking yourself on this date and savoring every moment and being present with the experience and being mindful in the way that you're approaching things. That's what that means. And so I agree with you about what you said about like self-care needs to expand, because to me, self-care is a non-negotiable. And I think that's the thing, is a lot of times we don't. A lot of times we think it's the extra. I'm going to do self-care if I can, if I have time in the day, if I have money in the bank, if I don't have to take care of the kids. And parents get really mad at me when I say this, but you have to come first. That's just the way that it is. It's so hard. And it's one of those, like, we have to get to that point, we do have to distill a lot of old information. but it is absolutely important for us to get to that point. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. No, and so true, because it's like you put it aside. I mean, I put it aside. I put it aside. I still put it aside, is the truth. And I do this. Like, I mean, I have ways that are self-care for me. I have a therapist I see every week, and that is a guaranteed hour that I can talk with her about myself, what's going on with me. And she's wonderful. I trust her. I've been seeing her for years. So like, I know that's built in. And that often is the only self-care that I do, and it's critical that I do that. But there are other pieces. And it's so funny because there's no prescribed way to do it. Like, some people might think that's torturous. I don't know. Like, some people be like, that is so not what I need in my universe. So I have another question. And then I want to ask you about the dark feminine, because that's an extraordinary piece of information I'd never knew. And I love it. So when you're working with your clients and you have somebody who is maybe more like of a pragmatic person, because I'm kind of a woo meets like cynic. You know what I mean? Like, kind of the combo. Like, I have a spirit, I have a soul, I believe in God, a higher power, or whatever. My home is feng shuied. Like, I did it. I do deep dives into some of these things. And then sometimes I'm just like, that's fucking crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like almost more of the pragmatist is the one who really more needs what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, the further do you get clients that are like that? We're calling them pragmatists. This sounds as pragmatic as you can get, but we'll call them that for now. How do you work with someone who is maybe not as open to these kinds of ideas and open them up to it in a way where they hear it or understand it or can do it?
Mhm. I love that. And I listen, the way that you are is the way that you should be. You know what I mean? Plus, there's something so beautiful about keeping a level of groundedness and a level of just awareness. Let's not even call it cynicism only. I mean, you can be, you know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of cynical myself, too. But you want to have a healthy dose of just observation. You want to keep observing, you want to keep learning, you want to keep leaning into things, and you want to have an understanding of them. And everybody understands things differently, right? Everybody's so unique. So what I love about the work that I do is really truly is tailor made for each person. This is why actually, in fact, as an entrepreneur, I will share this with you. This is sort of a pain point for me, because you know how like it's always like, tell me how you would sell to your ideal client. And I'm like, I immediately freeze, because I'm like, the thing is that I really work to the heart and to the mind and to the soul and to the subconscious and to every part of the person as they are. So what I love to do with people who are more like that, and I actually have had a couple of clients who are very clever, so smart.
Yes, that's the word. That's the word. Yes.
Yes, so thinking. And in fact, they're so in their brain in such a beautiful way that a lot of the way that I speak very poetically, as you can tell, I
Yes.
get
Yes.
very loquacious and very
Yeah.
verbose and stuff, and I love it. And they'll have to like sit and like look at me for a moment and be like, "Can you like how like give me the breakdown?" And it's funny to me because what I say to them is like, "What we want to try to do in your particular realm of existence, in your case, we want to learn to shift all of that mind awareness down into the heart a little bit more." So that it's not just known living. Like, you want to not just have the knowledge, you want to live it. You want to be embodied in it. You want to be to where like it oozes out of you. I have used this example way too many times. I feel like if you've seen me on any podcast or if you listen to my podcast, you probably heard me say this like 5 billion times. But I will say this. My neighbor does lawn for a living. And like, I know this because his lawn is beautiful. And so that's my point to people who are very pragmatic. I'm like, but you say that you want this amazing life for yourself. For example, I work with high achieving women, and I work with women who are very like type A driven, like they're excited for life. They see themselves succeeding at their business. They have these goals, these amazing dreams. And a lot of times that drive comes with you. You got to think, you got to be on your feet. You got to be able to map things out. And what I say to them is learn to drop into your body more too, though. Learn to understand that the feeling you get, that like gut reaction that you were like, I don't know if I should do that. Listen to that. And it starts paying off. And what I love to do with those clients too is listen to them. The words that we speak tell us a lot more than we realize. And so when I'm speaking, when I'm listening to someone, I'm hearing the way that they arrange the words. I'm hearing the words that they are choosing to set before them. And I'm listening to the story that narrative is telling me that they're not aware of. So sometimes it's something as simple as Did you notice that you use the word crazy to describe yourself? Well, yeah, but that's like, okay, let's just have a conversation with that word. Like, let's explore what that means. Like, tell me what that crazy look like. Well, it means this. Okay, that's fine. And then let's explore. Let's take that word on a date. What would change if we like just flipped it upside down? What would change if we gave it a different perspective? Do you still feel the same? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so we have the freedom to explore deeper into the self. But I would say that it's one of those things where, like, not only the things that we sometimes resist most are the things that we need most in our lives as well. I used to see this a lot when I was teaching yoga. I'm still teaching yoga because I love it. But like, I used to see it a lot in there when I was telling people, like, the days that you wake up and you don't want to practice yoga, those are the days that you need the yoga the most.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our lives. Like, a lot of times, the things that we're resisting most or the things that we are judging most within us are parts of the self that are showing up and that are asking to be taken care of. This is what I always say, and this is going to tie us into the dark feminine conversation, but this is what I always say about the subconscious, the way that your subconscious works. The parts of yourself and the things about the world and the things about other people that you think are just like, oh, I would never, that is blah, blah. Those are parts in you that are asking you to say, like, that are asking to get your attention, for you to be like, but hey, like, I want to do that a little bit too. Or, for example, I was brought up very religiously. And so when I would see, this is gonna sound so stupid, but when I would see Britney Spears on TV, for example, I used to get such like I just would my bristles would like I just would like just get so upset that she was like being slutty. And oh my God, the
Oh,
things that are like my younger self would say, I
yeah.
look back and I'm like, you sweet thing, I love you so much. Because you didn't know that version of me didn't know that sensuality and sexuality are good, they're worthy, they're valuable, they're important, they're essential, and they're worthy of respect. Now I know that, but back then I was judging that a lot. So that's what I mean when I say, and so for pragmatists, I think a lot of times we judge these woo concepts because they sound flowery, they sound like word salad, they sound like things that just don't make a lot of sense. And listen, a lot of us creatives don't know how to phrase things in a way that's going to make a lot of sense. Like, it's always like, give me the tangible result you're going to give your client. And I'm like, not going to feel stuck anymore. You're going to be yourself. You're going to be in your power. That's too pie in the sky. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to tell you? My clients tell me I changed their lives, and that's all I have to go on. But so I understand why a pragmatist will look at that and be like, pfft. At the same time, it's like, what if you just listened and were open to it for just 1 second and decided to give it your power instead of going like, oh, these people are crazy because they're talking about manifestation by lighting a candle and that's stupid. Okay, that's stupid. But what if you tell me what it is that you have done in your life that has opened the doors for you? And didn't that start as a dream? Because you didn't just wake up one morning and go, I'm going to go networking today and I'm going to blah, blah, blah. You had a dream. You were like, oh my God, one day I'm going to be on stage speaking to thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And then you decided to do what? You decided to write a book. You decided to go looking for speaking gigs. You decided to learn how to do. So you're manifesting. You just don't call it that. And so that's what I would say.
That's awesome. It's really cool. It's really an incredible way to put it. And it's sort of the opposite problem. It's like creative people tend to, it's harder to articulate what's happening because there is an amount of just letting something happen and just being open in it. I mean, you see actors all the time and they're talking and suddenly they're crying and you're like, why are they crying about that? And it's like, because that's their job. Like their job is to actually remain open. And that's not something you can shut down, like go home and shut down. And that's sort of you get to be an artist. And that is also part of what's hard about it is that you actually have to be that in order to be that. And then the opposite side is true too, because in order for you to a lot of times face the world and especially when your heart is maybe sensitive, but you're in a world that's tough, you really do have to pull that back a lot and you can't shut that off either. Interesting. Oh, you just shifted my whole perspective. I'm very excited. I want to know, how did this come to be? Like, where did you start this journey? Because this is a really deep dive into a lot of really incredible information that's not, I don't see it that much. Like, I've never heard of the dark feminine. Like, how did you get here?
Yeah. Oh my God. So I'll say this. I do want to circle back into the dark feminine world because I know that word in particular can be a little bit, people hear that and they're like, A, scared of it, B, don't understand it, and C, they're just chalk it up to like, again, the woo, this
Right.
woo.
Right.
I'm just going to
I
not look
was
into
like,
it.
is she a witch? Is she a Wiccan?
I didn't, when I first started, I was like, I'm not sure. What is that? And not
Yes,
at
I'm a
all. I'll say
human.
to the listeners so that we're going to, no, I don't mean like, but there are people who are like Wiccans and they believe in witchcraft. And
Yeah.
my cousin is one. And so like, I was a little bit aware of it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And
Absolutely. And I mean, I consider myself witchy, but I'll circle back to that as well. So
okay.
how it started was like I said earlier, when I was growing up and really even until like my late or early adulthood, I was very disgusted by myself. And I didn't like myself. Not only did I not like myself, I really hated my body. I didn't understand who I was. I thought that just from trauma and from lived experience, I thought that I was here to essentially bend over backwards for everybody else in order to gain even an iota of approval, which is actually something earlier in the conversation, you'd said something that reminded me of this. And that is that a lot of times we really tend to reflect this idea of, in order for me to have worth and value in this world, I have to give you a checklist. And if I give you this checklist and I check all the boxes out, then I get a gold star and then I get told that I am worthy and valuable. And so a lot of us have this wound. But for me, it was like so deep that I really thought, I believed that I was too much. I thought that I just took up too much space in this world. It seemed that people thought that I was too dramatic or too fantastical or too something, and that was wrong. I then also realized that my body seems to be too much as well for people because it was called fat my whole life. And that seemed to be an issue. And it made me sort of a pariah at school. I got bullied a lot. And so I started to understand that my ego really.
Same, by the way. This is getting interesting because very much same. Yeah.
So, and I love when we like find common ground. But so like my ego. So our egos are not, I think a lot of times we say the word ego and people think, oh, you're egotistical, you think you're too much, blah, 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 like, or you think you're too important, too self-important, you're narcissistic. No, your ego is there to look at the world and interpret what is going on and create narratives that are supposed to keep you safe. The thing is, in doing that, it creates processes that a lot of times keep us stuck in repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. And the reason I bring that up is my ego started interpreting a lot of these things and creating little stories for myself. One of them was that I was too much. One of them was that I wasn't good enough. Funny because like one and the other seemed that they would cancel each other out. However, most women I speak with feel this way. Too much, not good enough. And so that happened, and I developed a really serious eating disorder. I say it's funny when I say this also too, because, and I want to highlight this, a lot of people think that in order to have an eating disorder, you have to binge or you have to be anorexic or bulimic, and that's not the way that it works. Like even just dieting constantly, going from one diet to the next is a disordered eating, which 99.9% of the female population has an eating disorder. And I'm sorry, come at me, but it's the truth. I'm just going to tell you how it is. And so that started that way. I also, at the same time, had developed this really toxic dynamic with people in my world. And I got into a pattern where I would not just walk on eggshell, but bend over backwards for them, give them everything off me, pour so much of myself that I was completely disappearing altogether, and then allowed myself to be mistreated in ways that I didn't even recognize as mistreatment. And so that eventually led to me ending in a really toxic marriage that lasted for 13 years. Like that is a long freaking time. And the thing was that how my self-reclamation started because I started understanding something important about the divine feminine. And so I was still in the marriage, but I had gone through, I've been teaching yoga for a long time at that point already, but I had gotten into a place of self-exploration where I will never forget this. I was at a yoga conference teaching a particular class on Arjuna, and I love stories. And so this was like a very special time for me. And I left that class and I was a little heightened. I'm also an HSP. So overstimulates me a lot. HSP, highly sensitive person. So I get overstimulated very quickly. So I left and I was like kind of looking for a place to hide because, at events, there's a billion people around and noises and people selling stuff and yada. So I came across this. It looked like a tent out in the desert kind of, but it was red completely. And you walked inside and it was immediate peace and it was quiet and calm. And I remember feeling like I was coming home, which I never felt like I was home growing up, ever, not once. In fact, I used to tell my mom that a lot when I was little. I just kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I just never found that. And it was one of the first times, I'm getting emotional. It was one of the first times that I felt that. I was like, there's something here, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And there was women sitting there just holding each other or being quiet or meditating, or it just was like I just knew that there was something special about that. And in that moment, I really started deepening, because I spoke to the woman that was like really running the Red Tent, and she told me about the Red Tent book. And I devoured it, devoured it like if my life depended on it. And I then started going back to like some of my books from college, some psychology, some sociology. But I went back to some of my books and some of my notes, because I remember like always having this like passion for like women coming together, and like, I don't know, I just had this thing. Then I started reading more and more about the divine feminine. And because I had been brought up religiously, this was a taboo thing. This was a thing that I wasn't supposed to be doing, because then I would be labeled a witch. I would be ostracized. I would be dealing with witchcraft, yada, yada. And then I recognized something that really changed my life, which was that the divinity of each person in this world is sacred, it's important, it's vital, it's necessary. And without it, we are lost. Because if we don't understand that we are divine beings just by existing, just because the fact that we're here, think about how many freaking planets and how many like light years and everything, and you exist. Like the fact that you exist means something. So even if you're atheist, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just your existence is something to marvel at, one way or the other. I cannot see it any other way. And so that's where my journey started. And what it first started off as, because what I tell people is, listen, the healing journey is not a straight line. It's always like a spiral staircase. The spiral staircase imagery actually came from one of my friends. And I love her for saying this, because like I have been using it ever since, and I always give her credit because of it. But what I love about this is like, you're not on a hamster wheel. You're going up a spiral staircase. If you've ever climbed a spiral staircase, one of the things that happens is you start thinking you're going around in circles. You start to wonder if you're losing your sanity, because you're like, wait, have I not been here before? Because also you're looking out windows, right? But the windows are looking at the same things along the way. And so that's your healing journey. You start and you think you're crap, I thought I healed this. Oh, here it is again. But you're still climbing up the ladder. And so for me, where it started was in that room in the beautiful red tent. And what started happening was I started understanding how important I was. And I started recognizing how many wounds of the divine feminine I carried within me. For example, the thing about the sensuality, the thing about the sexuality. I never thought that was a thing. In fact, I think that like one of the reasons I ended up in the relationship that I ended up in was because we had sex before marriage. My mom is listening to this. She's going to have a heart attack.
Okay.
And I thought that now I needed to get married, because this was it.
Oh, wow.
I had made that decision. And so now I was tied for life. So I started understanding it differently. And then I started recognizing, oh, there's power in being feminine. There's polarities. And that doesn't have to be about gender, but it's just like the way that the universe is built, and there's duality. And so I can hold everything at the same time. I don't have to be so rigid, because I was very rigid in my thinking. And it started to crack the walls so deeply. I remember having a conversation with one of my best friends, and we were talking about my eating disorder. And I was committed. I was like, I know this is not good. And I mean, I studied psychology. I know that this isn't healthy, and I don't care. I'm going to keep doing it because I want to be skinny, whatever. And I remember waking up one morning and going, that's gone. Like, I really want to honor my body. I want to treat myself the way that I would love to treat the people that I love in my life. And so that started changing. And progressively, it started going more and more. And what started happening is then my personal career life started catching up. So like I started doing yoga, I started teaching that. People were asking me, what do you do to stay healthy? And then I was like, well, I'm not just going to tell you to eat salad, which is what, unfortunately, a lot of the people who do yoga do. And it's like, no, I'm going to study nutrition. So I studied nutrition. Then I started having nutrition consultations with people, because my tag was, I was there to help women change their relationship to food and self. And then when we were sitting across from each other, none of these women were really asking me for nutritional advice. They started pouring out their hearts to me, which is something that had been happening to me since I was like 5. Like, I remember my brothers are way older than me, by the way, like way older. So I remember my brother's girlfriend at some point asking me at freaking 6 for dating advice. And it sounds insane.
No, you were a wise kid though, weren't you?
But because I could say things that she never heard from anybody else. And so it was the same thing, just caught up.
Yeah.
So then at that time, I was like, now I have all of this knowledge of the divine feminine, and I want to really anchor women into their power. And I want to help them thrive and break free of the shackles of all the believing that we have to be quiet and meek and subservient, and that we have to follow these like rules. And I want to break them free of misunderstanding, the sacred slut, the witch wound, like there's the crone wound. That's where the dark feminine resides. And I'm like, I want to do this work. And as I was doing that, how could I have done any of that work if I would have stayed in the relationship that I was in? And so things started to fall to pieces in that relationship really quickly. And I finally was able to break free of that. And as soon as I did that, all of a sudden, like the floodgates open and I started really hyper focusing on this. And when it comes to the dark feminine, what was interesting for me, again, I was brought up religiously, so it was scary to me. I had studied shadow work when I was studying psychology in college, and I knew what Jung meant by the shadow aspects of self, AKA meaning, like I said earlier, the parts of you that reside within you that you yourself judge harshest. Like if you, for example, believe that you're a selfish person, that is a shadow aspect of self. It is possible that if expressed a particular way, following a particular patterning in your life, it comes off as selfishness. Yes. And you can speak to that part of self and you can understand it and you can transmute, transform, change, transition, and make it something new. And you also get to walk side by side with these things. So a lot of things that we judge in ourselves are not even bad. We just think they're bad because we've been looking at what everybody else has been telling us along the way, like I said.
Yeah, we've assigned it those things.
Yeah. And so the dark feminine, what it is think about what it is like to be a woman empowered, truly empowered. I think sometimes we think if I'm a woman and I'm empowered, that means I'm a successful businesswoman. You know, I've got my shit together. I can do all things. And it doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that at all. But to be a woman fully steeped in your power means to have personal sovereignty, means that you hold yourself to a very high level of integrity in your life. It means that you hold emotional intelligence like nobody's fucking business. You can do emotional intelligence like that. It means that you understand and you respect that the world ebbs and flows, that you're going to have ups and downs, and that the downs don't mean that you are cursed and that the ups don't mean that you are better than everybody else. It means that you hold yourself to radical accountability and ownership, which then means you get to hold everyone else to the same high standard. And that's when it gets really tricky because a woman in her dark feminine energy is going to hold you accountable. And you better come on and meet her where she's at, because if not, she's not going to hesitate. She's going to walk away. Take me for granted, I'm out. And it's like that whole right now, I think that TikTok makes for where like a lot of these conversations can be had, but they tend to be so quick and they tend to be so hermetically sealed that a lot of information gets missed. And so you've heard this before where people say like, match energy. I will match your energy. I think that's good. It's a good starting place for you to understand that, hey, like, why would I bend over backwards for you if you like barely ever even try to show up in my world?
Right.
And I think we can take it further within the dark feminine paradigm is like, you are treating me like crap. It's done. Like I am removing myself from the equation. I'm not even matching energy anymore. I am moving on to what is going to benefit me best. And that's part of the conversation of the dark feminine that makes people uncomfortable, is that it's very self-centric, but it's not self-centric in a self-indulgent, very manipulative or weird narcissistic kind of way. It's self-aware. It is self-loving. It is self-caring. It's self-appreciating, because we tend to be very self-depreciative. And it is very self-loving, self-caring, self-healing, self-soothing, self-aware. And so what it does is it invites you to say, if these are the standards that I'm showing up with in my life, then these are the energetic alignment fields that I'm going to come across. In other words, if I would have stayed in that really toxic relationship, then I was going to be opening myself up to more of the same abuse. You know what I mean? So instead, what I chose to do was completely change, even when that meant uprooting my entire world and just moving into a lot of pain and the unknown of, I didn't know how I was going to pay my bill. Like, honestly, it just was like a whole thing. But it opened the door to something so much more incredibly wonderful for myself, within myself first. I fell in love with myself. I really thought that I was going to be alone forever. And I don't mean this negatively.
No,
I don't mean this. I was
Yeah.
excited. I was like, oh my God, now I get to actually be just me for the rest of my life and be single and be like, but not even single in the way that like sometimes we interpret it. I just was like happy by myself. And all of a sudden, in comes my current husband, who's amazing. He just showed up out of nowhere. And I was like, why are you here, man? Like, I was doing fine.
You're like, I was planning to be with myself the whole time, and you're like messing it up.
Exactly. I'm like, I was going to be that creepy old lady with the shack in the woods that everybody was like, she's a witch, because I am a witch. And so I was like, and now you show up and ruin everything. But so that's what the dark feminine is. If you hear the word dark feminine, it doesn't mean, it's not like weird. It doesn't mean you have to be a witch. You can be whatever you want. It just means, but are you in your personal sovereignty though? Like, or are you at the effect of the world? That's really what it comes down to. In fact, it's funny. I have this I just started because I'm like so weird about technology, but I just started on Instagram this channel. They call them channel. And so what it is like the people in your channel, only they get the messages that you want to send them or whatever. And I started one that's specifically around the dark feminine because I want to dispel a lot of the misinformation out there. A lot of the information of the dark feminine out there is if you're a dark feminine, you can seduce any man that you want and you can be a siren and you're going to have them wrapped around your little finger and you're going to manipulate them to your way of thinking and you're going to walk like Angelina Jolie. I'm like, listen, can we like not, I mean, I love Angelina Jolie, but like, can we not like do this? Can we stop watering down what it is? Because what it comes down to at the end of the day is personal power, which is what I do, empowering women. And so that's what the realm of the dark feminine is. And yeah, I mean, I do things that are witchy, right? To people like, I like candles, I have rituals, I like I talk to my plants, I talk to my animals. So in that sense, I think it's important for us to understand that's a wounding of the feminine too. We've been told that if we connect to nature, that if we understand the cycle, that if we love our period, goddess forbid, that if we say the word goddess instead of God, that if we think in terms that are more supple, more feminine, more receptive, less harsh, less abrasive, that we are witchy and that we are wrong and that we are evil and like, screw that.
Yeah. It's funny you're saying that. I'm a single mom by choice. And my daughter, she's surrounded by girls more than boys. My parents are in the building. My dad's actually very nurturing. I mean, he's like a man's man, but he's also very nurturing. He's always like, when I was growing up, my friends called him dad. Like he was that guy. And he's a great like male role model in a lot of ways for her. So I'm like, I feel confident that she's got that male energy around her. But sometimes like she's around women all the time. And sometimes I'm like, do I need to find more male role model? Like, you inevitably are thinking this, or at least I am. I'm trying to like give her as much of an quote unquote normal experience as I can and give her as much. I'm a Libra, she's a Libra, we're born on the same day. Like,
what?
Yeah, that's a whole other. Yeah, I mean, she's literally the miracle baby in all the ways. But I mean,
Beautiful.
really. So like all her dolls are she's. Like she's got a blankie. It's a she. Like there's a lot of she's. So sometimes I'm like, when she's like, I only like girls, and I was like, okay. I was like, I like boys too. And I've always had like really close men friends as well as really close women friends. Like I've always been that girl who's like, it's not the gender. Like I don't go. My friends right now, like they're definitely more the women are, I'm in perimenopause and you need to like, yeah, you need to
I
like
get it.
attach at that point. But, like I want her to have both and she does, which is cool, but she's naming all of these, everything is a girl, right? And, which is also fine. Like, great. I don't, she's a girl. I want her to love herself and everything else. But, well, we went to Rosh Hashanah was last week and I took her to temple. And it was the first time she was in like the like family sanctuary and everything else. It's the first time really that I've talked about God in any kind of way. Like I'm religious. I'm not very religious. And, God, it's around us and I talk about it freely, but I'm not actually, that's not how I teach her. You know what I mean? And this is the first time that really got brought up. And she at some point said something about, is God a boy or a girl? And I was like, what do you think it is? And she was like, well, I don't know. I want to know. And I said, okay, well, what do you want it to be? And she thought for a minute. She says, I want it to be a girl. I said, then she is a goddess. I'm half a century. And I was like, a 5-year-old is having that moment where she is deciding who this experience is. Like whether you believe in God, I don't care. I'm not trying to preach. I don't judge that. Like ultimately it's what gets you through your life and your day. Do it. Just don't harm anybody while you're doing it. But I love that a 5-year-old who's so sort of pure of all of these like layers and stuff like that, she didn't think twice about like genderizing it or needing it to be what she needs it to be right now.
Mm-hmm. And what's really beautiful about that is psychologically speaking, at 5 is when a lot of changes start to happen. That's when a lot of the really deep-seated stories of the subconscious get firmly cemented on. And I will say this, as a whole, humanity right now, it depends on what part of the world, but I will say this, at least in the West, right? We are experiencing a resurgence of the divine feminine in a way that it has never happened before. that is a lot of female centric power is being demanded, is being awakened. It's not going to like lay down and take it anymore. And I think that the babies that are coming into this world feel that energetically, even if they don't understand it, they can put words into it. And I think that she may be perceiving that and understanding that there is a beauty to the feminine essence that has nothing to do with gender, which by the way, like I don't know if this is going to like make you feel better, but like
No.
her friends, even though they're all girls and everything, there's always going to be someone who's going to have a deeper masculine energy. So I promise you, like
Yes.
that masculine energy is there. She feels that she knows it.
Yes. She also has boyfriends who have a very deep feminine energy, by the way. Like
Yeah.
very pure in that universe. It's very cool, but it's very like that's a whole other unwrapping. But yes, it's wild to see how that moves within children at that point in life. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's fine. It's beautiful. And what it does is like this community, first of all, humans in general were meant to be communal. At some point, we forgot this. We decided where every man was an island onto their own. And that was like just the biggest mistake we could have possibly made because it creates a lot of strife. It creates a lot of hatred. It creates a lot of things that we see in the world that are not good. But we're meant to be communal. And women in particular, this is something that I learned that day in the red tent. Women in particular, and reading the book, which like if anybody's listening and you haven't read this book, read the book. It changed my life.
It's called The Red Tent.
The red tent. Yeah, it's amazing. And so like what we are meant to be in each other's spaces all the time. Like we're not meant to be isolated. It's funny that you said you were someone who always had friends and everything. I was kind of the opposite of you. I had mostly male guy friends because male guy friends. But anyway, the way that I phrased it was funny. But the reason why was because the girls bullied me really deeply. They bullied me a lot, and I had zero safety within my friends, my female. I had one or two female friends who were just the world to me. One of them, unfortunately, passed a few years back, and I still remember her every day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But it's okay. She's with me. I leave like a little offering on my altar for her every October and everything. But I'm also Mexican, so we do Day of the Dead at my house.
Oh,
I never
amazing.
experienced that, and so for me, that concept of feminine, energetic, like in conjunction and female friendships was so scary. It was boring. It was actually like disgusting a little bit. I couldn't understand how people could do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially as I was going through my divorce, I realized, like I knew from being in the red tent and I was teaching divine femininity up until then. And I was always saying like, no, the female energy is like really important. Women are meant to run in pack like wolves. Like this is how we are. But it's like I said earlier, like with the pragmatic thing, I was being very pragmatic in my teaching of this because I knew it up here, but I didn't feel it in my sense.
Yeah.
In my body until the divorce happened. And then because I was surrounded by such a powerful wolf pack, I'll say like if my friends are my world. And even when I like started dating my husband now, Brian, I was like, you have to understand my friends come first. Like
wow.
they are my whole world. And this is the reason why he knows that he's like on the same level. But like,
that takes a very special man to hear that and not get offended or stay, and know that that's okay. That's actually making.
Exactly. And that was the comprehension that I was looking for. And I think for us, like if we understand we actually need this as nourishing. And it, like you said, I think sometimes it's a delay. Like when we get into perimenopause, by the way, I'm there with you. But like when we get there, when we start changing again and we feel unreasonable and we don't know what's going on. And that's when we start like, I need more women because someone else has to be experiencing the same thing I'm experiencing. We look for commonality. And yet we need those friendships like the whole way through. And what killed me is, and I did a whole episode about this on my own podcast, but it was like, it kills me that people really believe that it's so impossible to make girlfriends, like female friends. And I'm like, I understand why, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there and take the leap of faith, just like you would if you were dating, and understand that it's vital, man. Like it's vital. And also understand not everyone is going to meet you at that level. Not everyone is going to be compatible. And yet some people are going to be jealous. And yes, some people are going to just want to network and some people are just going to want to get something out of you, but you can spot them. You know that energetic field real quick. So you will, if you, again, not to circle back to this, but like if you hold yourself in personal sovereignty, you will know how to handle that stuff and you will know how to move through the things. And also like, listen, cycles of life mean you don't get to be friends forever unless you're meant to be friends forever. Right. And that's okay. And I think a lot of times that hurts us because listen, I will tell you, I have broken up with girlfriends before, like, and honestly, that hurt more than my divorce did. It can be so painful. So I get it. But we be willing to do that. I love that your daughter does it. Like, I just feel like that is the generation that is going to like really lean into this feminine energetic so much more than the current ones.
Yeah.
Because I just see it. I just feel it. But I love that like understanding is there, and that concept of like I sometimes call goddess, like as in there's no gender, so it has to
Oh,
be
cool. Oh, I'm gonna use
like an
that.
all
You
inclusive.
mind if I steal that? I'll attribute it to you, but I'm definitely using that.
Yeah, I think about it that way too because I go back and forth, you know, God, goddess, but like a lot of my understanding of how my own divinity came to light and how my own life turned around and went from like really not living and surviving to thriving and having a life that just feels again like a romance for the ages is because of that, because of her, because I can see the reflection of the goddess in myself and I want to be that reflection for other people and I want other people to feel that embracing. And not that there's anything wrong with the masculine is beautiful when it's like balanced, when it's like
Yeah.
organically,
Yeah.
like beautifully present. It's beautiful, and together with this, oh, amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because I say this a lot, especially as the conversation around gender has really started more in the last couple of years. And the idea of like just not being non binary and my generation, Gen X, it's like the Gen X generation we're basically like, do whatever you want. Like, I'll do whatever you want. Like, we're so over all the things
Yeah,
that it's like, I'll support you in any way you need to be supported because partially I grew up in an environment where people were finally starting to change, things. And then also, I just don't give a fuck. Like, you be it's like a kind of combo. But the thing that's funny is that I always think when I'm female, identify as female, I'm heterosexual, all the things. But the truth is that I lead my life, my energy has a lot of masculinity in it in that kind of a way. Like, and my abilities have a lot of masculine energy in them because I can fix things I can rewire a light fixture. I shoot a gun. I'm an excellent card, like all the stuff, like those kinds of things. It's not just that I'm good at them. I'm interested in them.
yeah,
I'm interested in being the hunter gatherer. I'm interested in being that take care of, not just in the like home way, but in the outside world way. And as I started hearing this conversation and a lot of people that I follow that are like non-binary or trans and shifting genders and transitioning, it's hard to sometimes explain to people because they're like, I'm sorry, you're like in a skirt and a red bow. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, that's not what it is. Like,
right.
I do understand what they're talking about when somebody says they. It's what they're I really understand it in a way that I probably wouldn't have maybe 10 years ago. And I attribute a lot of things. Once I had my kid, it was like the journey to get to having my kid, which was like a 12-year journey. So it was like a lot was going on. But it really is like you really understand what the gender inside you, there are both. And we all have both. And innately, they are balancing sometimes more, sometimes less. You need sometimes more. I love that you said, like during perimenopause, you're like, I need my women, I need the women, I need them because we need to be able to talk to them and stuff like that. I wanted to go back because I think it's interesting. So how did you break through to creating these women friends? Because I find it interesting that do you work solely with women?
Yeah, I work solely with women. One of them I made when I was teaching yoga. Is she's my dearest and nearest. She was like the only mate, like bridesmaid, but also the maid of honor at my wedding. So she's just in my world. Right now, I sometimes call her sister, which may annoy her a little bit.
I'm sure she loves it too.
Yes. So how we met was we were in yoga and she was my student for a long time. And I was actually leaving that studio because they had change of management. And I was just like, nah, I'm not gonna roll with these people anymore. So I was like leaving. And she said before, she's like, oh my God, but you know what? You're nerdy like I am. So can we go to Comic-Con together? And I was like, yeah, we can go to Comic-Con together. And we have become like again, she's my world. I love her to pieces. It's just, she's amazing. And I will say this, it's similar to dating. A lot of times the people that you meet that are going to be closest to you are in your world. I don't think that we can only exist online. So, for example, one of my other really closest friends, we used to work. This is a long, long time ago when I was working for Enterprise, the rental car company.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Her and I worked together and we worked at the same crappy location and we just became really close friends. And she still actually just saw her last week when I was in Orlando for like about an hour because it was the only time that we had a lot of night ride when I left because I just love her so much. So I just have been another one was a coworker actually of my ex-husband's. And we just were like this. And the day that I called her up when I was like decided that I'm getting divorced and this is not for me, blah, blah, I called her And I told her, and she immediately was like, I choose you. And I
Oh,
was like,
that's
it
it.
just was like, it was the most beautiful thing. And then because I was afraid, I had been wanting to leave. I used to live in Houston, Texas, and I had been wanting to live in Nashville, Tennessee since I was little. Like my brother and my sister-in-law have been living there for like decade. And I just wanted to go. It's been a dream of mine. It just hadn't come true. But I was like, I am the manifester. I'm the sovereign of my life. I'm going to make this
Yeah.
happen. And so post-divorce, I'm like, one way or another, I'm going to end up there. This is the role I'm going. In fact, it's funny. Speaking of how amazing my current husband is, like one of the conversations we had when we were just barely starting to date. I think we were like maybe 2 months into dating, officially dating. I said, well, I had a conversation someday. I was like, nah, man, like my road is taking me to Nashville, blah, blah. You ever could see myself living in Nashville? And I was like, I am not moving across country with you. Like, we have to live together for a
Yeah.
while. And
Yeah.
then I can, because I learned my lesson. So
Right.
I was like, so we did. And once we did, and I realized that we worked really well together cohesively, talk about that balance, right? We found that balance within each other. That's when we moved over there. But when I moved, I said that, all of that to say that when I moved to Nashville, I had been, but through, I don't remember how, I just knew someone who was like one day posted on Instagram and said, hey, I'm moving to Nashville. And I was like, shut up, I'm going to be there. And it happened with two different people who are to this day, like also two of my closest friends, just like women that I like die for. Like they're amazing. And so that's how we got together. And that's how the connections happen. And so that's what I mean when I say, like, I understand why people believe that it's difficult to make relationships, right? And I include romantic relationships in this. However, it is not impossible. It's just that sometimes we have to put ourselves in a situation that is going to be out of our comfort. I told one of my closest friends, one of the girls that posted that she was moving to Nashville, I was so intimidated by her because she's beautiful and she's got this like amazing sensual energy that she just exudes. And I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. And I met her, I think maybe like networking one time at like a business conference or something like that. And I just like, but like from afar. And I remember thinking I sat with, speaking of self-seduction, I had to self-seduce myself a little bit because I was dealing with some younger parts who were still feeling very bullied by the girls like in my youth and who were like, we would never have a seat at the table. She would kick us out. She'd be like, Regina George, blah, blah. Then I was like, screw you guys. I get to make my own seat at the table.
Yeah.
And if I don't belong there, then I don't belong there. And that's the end of that. And I reached out to her and now we're like the closest of friends. And so it's like, that's what I mean when I say have hope, like do not give up. Like just understand that it's up to you though. You're the one at the helm. This is the hill that I will die on. And this is the work that I do with women on purpose, like for a reason. It's like you get to be the sovereign of your life. If you don't choose, then you're never going to have the life that you want. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter how much manifestation you do. Like, no, you have to be at the helm of your story. Before I move on, you said something really interesting, which I want to touch on, which you were talking about how you like being like the provider and everything. I think we get very confused. There's a lot of misinformation, but there's a lot of like there's a lot of stuff when it comes to the polarities. What I want people to know as well, but for you is like, if the feminine provides as well. And I just want you to think about the lioness being the one that's the huntress.
Ooh. Oh my God.
So, yep, that is not a masculine.
No, you're right. It sure
No,
isn't.
both provide. You provide in different ways. But yeah, you are still in provision. Like that's one of those things. Like I also like always bristle when people say that the feminine is just nurturing, and I'm like, no, she can do that. However, again, go fuck with a lioness, and you tell me if you're going to survive the night. If she was nurturing to you, she wasn't, and that's fine. That we get to be all of those things, and both of those things exist within us. And at times in your life, you need to be more one or the other. When I was still doing a little bit of more heavily relationship coaching, kind of. But it's been a while since, but like when I was still doing more of that, what I would always tell people is like, if you feel like you love your masculine energy and you love to do these things, but find yourself someone who's got more feminine in them. And that doesn't mean they have to be the same sex. It could be whatever. There are men who are a bit more feminine in their energy, and there's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't mean that they're like, whatever. Do you just lean with whatever works for you? And I think that's also why, to further the conversation of like the gender, I'm like, listen, they make sense. Also, like this is going to bristle some people and it's going to bother some people, but listen.
And it needs to be said.
Supposedly, right, God it made us in their image. Their image. There's really no gender to this great unifying universal universe, whatever you want to call it. There's no gender. So if we're in that image, then where's the problem?
Yep. Totally. Oh, wow. That's like mind blown entirely. No, I'm going to really think about that from the lioness. I think it's kind of amazing because that makes more sense to me on a certain level. Wow. Okay. I am conscious of time and this has been amazing. And I actually would love to have you come on at another time and we can go down the road of gender. I think that would be an incredible conversation with you.
Let's do it.
In the meantime, I want you to tell everybody out there how they can reach you, where they can find you, you know, what you do and who you serve and who would be like ready to come in and talk to you. All the things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's totally. I'll come back any day, anytime. So anyone who is looking to remember who they are, like if you're a person who feels like you've gotten to a point in your life where you're like, I don't even remember who I am anymore, what I like, what I want to do. Or if you feel like I've literally been at this forever. I've been going to therapy. I've been reading the books. I've been doing self-help. I've been doing all the things and I still feel stuck in my life and something's still missing and I don't know what it is, but I don't feel like I am the person that I want to be, like the woman I want to become. Come to me. Because together we're going to break down the walls and together we're going to re-aliven you and take you to your next level evolution. This is the work that we get to do together. And we do it through mindful self-seduction and personal sovereignty. To me, like those two are the most powerful tools that we could possibly use to do any of this. If you're ready for that next chapter, just come find me. You can find me on Instagram, of course, at Your Soulful Goddess. And I named the company Your Soulful Goddess because you, the person I'm working with and walking side by side with, is the goddess. You are a soulful goddess. So we get to do this life together and you can email me info at Your Soulful Goddess. But yeah, those are the places to find me. I've got a podcast called Mindfully Sovereign. For some reason, when I get interviewed, I sometimes forget to mention it, but at least I remembered today.
I'm glad you remembered. I would have reminded you had you not, but yes.
Yeah, those are all the places. Those are all the ways. I'm someone who also, because you heard me say earlier, like I understand everyone works uniquely. I work one-on-one with people. For a while, I was doing like the whole programs and everything. And I just realized I don't learn that way and I don't want to be that way. So really what it is we get to do this life together. I call myself a mentor, not a coach, because I'm not here to grab you by the hand and take you step by step to things. I also don't have a booklet of, well, coaching level number 1 says we have to ask these questions. Like I literally respond to what your soul tells me. And together we walk through, and sometimes we walk through Hades together, but we always come out the other end and it's always worth it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming today. This was such a fantastic conversation, deep dive, everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please hit subscribe. You can also find me at carolpodell.com, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Carol Podell. You can watch this at She Takes the Lead podcast on YouTube. If you'd like to keep in touch, go to my website. I've got a few things I'd love to send you. In the meantime, mwah.